Before the division, I was just making the point that one of the areas in the Governor-General's speech that the government had indicated they were going to prioritise was the NDIS, and I had made the point that the need to appoint a head of the NDIA, the agency that runs the NDIS, the need to address the fact that there's significant under-resourcing because of the cap that's placed on the employment for people who deliver agency decisions was causing major gaps in time and to get plans in place, to get plans reviewed, to ensure that the services and equipment people are needing are delivered, and that this is an issue that every constituent office will be dealing with consistently. And I also wanted to highlight the fact that several of my providers, most of them not-for-profit providers of long standing in our area, have raised with me their concern that the government made a promise to the sector that they would put boosted additional funding into packages to enable the providers to do the adjustments that they need to do to be able to provide services to people, whether that's things like new software or other adjustments in staffing and so forth that they need to do at their organisation. And they're very upset that the government has actually gone back on that commitment and is saying to them they have to take that money out of the package that the client has, and so in effect take the money from the client, and obviously that's against their ethos, and they're very unhappy, and I have written to the Minister about that. I just want to touch generally on the fact that education was mentioned in the Governor-General's address, and obviously it was a major area of disagreement between the government and Labor in the election campaign, and I'm very disappointed on behalf of my constituents to not see the $18 million in additional funding that would have gone into our schools, but also increased funding to our TAFE and universities and a much fairer and more accessible early childhood education commitments. In particular, at the University of Wollongong, we had a $10 million commitment to a facility for intelligent fabrication and $1 million to establish a 3D bioprinting facility. This is really important research work that our university does in 3D and biotechnology, and would have helped us build on that, as well as $2.5 million for the Early Start Discovery bus to take that bus that engenders the excitement in preschool-aged children with science and technology and maths to other regions, including my colleague, the member for Gilmore's areas, where there are disadvantaged children who aren't able to access the amazing Discovery Space facility that's actually at the University of Wollongong. There was a section on government services, and look, I won't even begin to go through my gripes with this government on delivering services. When you look at the waiting lists to get processed for the age pension, when you look at the robo-debt scheme, these are all things I've spoken in this House about before. Government service delivery is an oxymoron. They are not delivering government services in a timely way, in a compassionate way, in even an effective way, and really does need a great deal more attention. There was also, in a similar vein, climate change was listed. Obviously, there is a significant disappointment with the government on climate change, and as many of my colleagues have said, a PR exercise and grasping at whatever alternative talking points you can think of, whether it's recycling or plastics in ocean, as important as they are not an alternative for an energy policy and action on climate change. I mentioned Indigenous Australians at the beginning, but there's also a section on older Australians. In my area, the wait list for home care packages is a disgrace. The fact that there are people in this nation dying before they receive the home care package that they were assessed as needing is a disgrace, and the impacts on families who are the carers for these elderly people is heartbreaking. It is just not acceptable, in particular to have women, but also men who come in and who are looking after elderly relatives who will tell you they've had to give up their job in order to be able to do that. is just devastating on families, and there really must be urgent attention given in the aged care sector. Obviously, we have the Royal Commission, and that is doing important work, but we need action now on so many of these aspects. And finally, the Governor-General's response on the government's agenda talked about ending violence against women. This is a very important area in which to take action. It is by and large done on a bipartisan basis. I just want to say that I was very pleased with my colleague, the member for Whitlam, to secure a commitment of $1.5 million for the Illawarra Women's Health Centre to establish a service to support women escaping domestic and family violence. I thought that was a really important initiative that they were looking at putting in place, and certainly from my perspective it's something I'll continue to lobby this government and to find opportunities for grants to enable this wonderful service that does just amazing work locally to be able to run that program on domestic violence. So, as I said, I thought the Governor-General did a wonderful job in his presentation of his opening of this Parliament, and I acknowledge that the agenda outlined by the government was covered in that speech, and I hope I've given some idea about the areas of that are important in my electorate and where we would like to see more achievement delivered on those priority areas. I thank the House.